And while the Ghana National Association of Teachers also call on authorities to arrest students who perpetrate violence against its members, some blame the psychosocial mindset of the students within the COVID-19 period for having an effect on the student. We've been joined on Zoom by Dr. Ruth Oswentry. She's a consultant psychiatrist and lecturer with the KNUST, and later we'll also be joined by educationist Dr. Mike Boakye-Yadom, who is a fellow with the Institute of Educational Planning Studies at the UCC. But let me start with you, Dr. Oswentry. Thank you very much for joining us. Some have said that this is simply an effect of COVID, having stayed at home with a long break, and truncated their studies somewhat because not a lot of them had access to the platforms that were made available. This could be the reason why we are seeing what we are witnessing today.
Yeah, thank you very much and good morning. It is multifactorial. I will first of all say that I totally condemn the actions of the students. If this had been in any other era, I would have straightforward said that we should bring in punitive measures to deter others. However, in this era of the pandemic, I would rather suggest that we go into the matter deeper. It is not surprising that these students behaved this way. When people are distressed, they are likely to behave in untoward manner. And we are all very much aware of the distress everybody is going through, the whole world, all over. I am not sure the amount of psychosocial support these students got prior to their exams, but on the background of an anxiety from a pandemic, they had gotten news of their colleagues dying in other schools, or their colleagues getting the virus and all that. And then getting into an exam hall and coming back with the sense that you probably have failed this paper makes it a double distress that is likely to make people who are not appropriately and emotionally or psychologically prepared behave in the manner these students behaved. Again, this brings on board one major deficit in our education, that probably we are only concentrating on IQ. I mean, there are several forms of intelligence. Not too long ago, there were 3 of them, intelligence quotients, what we use to measure how an individual can, for instance, calculate mathematics and solve questions, comprehend things and all that. And then there is intelligence, there is emotional quotient that we probably are missing in our education or in our educational system. That shows how people behave in the face of adversity, in the face of distress, in the face of trouble, how people can understand the boundaries that they have. I think we are missing that in our educational system, and if we don't take care, we are going to produce a crop of people or a crop of adults who may have intelligence quotient but may not have the emotional quotient. And again, during this pandemic, I said over and over again that young people and children, for that matter, are copying adults. They are looking out for how adults will behave, and then it would reflect in how they would respond to the distress that this pandemic has brought. There were videos of parents agitated, walking to schools, causing trouble, causing commotion and all that. And if children see that adults are responding and behaving this way to the distress this pandemic is bringing, then they would tend to believe and tend to learn that that is the way that they should also react to distress. So it is multifactorial.
For those who say that this is sheer indiscipline, and must be dealt with, and this shows a certain lack of preparedness by the students. Because yesterday when we had Dr. Mike Boakye-Yadom, and he will join us shortly, he thought that this was being exaggerated, because if you look at the figures, we have over 600 senior high schools. The issues reported are not even up to 20 There may be some going on, we don't know. But, I mean, if you look at the figures, you are not seeing, in terms of the ratio, this is just an insignificant number, however worrying it is. And so these are students who are just indisciplined, they don't prepare enough, and must be dealt with.
I beg to differ from that stand. Even if it was just one school, I don't think that we should just gloss over it and think that it is sheer indiscipline. We are not in normal times. I have said that I condemn the act. However, the students should be given an opportunity to speak out. They should be given an opportunity to get some form of psychosocial support. There is distress already in the system, and your inability to have passed an exam or to have been able to write your exams in these times is likely to bring on a double form of distress, because there was already a background distress and a stressor. And so aside, if this had happened in other times, I would have probably said, let us go forward straight away and discipline these students. But in this pandemic, in the midst of all the distress we are having all over the world, I think that we should give the opportunity for these students to have some form of psychosocial investigations into their behavior. Some of them may have been filled with total anxiety, and then coming out with a feeling that I have failed my exams is likely to present with this kind of behavior. We must find out, did these students receive the requisite psychosocial support throughout their stay on campus as was promised? All these students, were they assigned psychologists? Were they assigned counselors? Did they receive that support and preparation towards their exams? We should not go straight forward and discipline them without looking into some of these issues.
Now, in an attempt to deal with the situation, the Ghana Education Service issued a statement last night, and it's warning that it would deal with students who are found guilty in these incidents. It also says that it will not accept any plea from parents who want to mitigate the effect of sanctions that will be meted out to these students. But even before that, it says that students in boarding houses will be deboardinized. And I don't know how that would help address this situation, especially when you talk of the psychosocial support that must be given to the students. Is that a good approach, to deboardinize some of these students?
You know, that could be one of the options. But all that I'm sending across is that do not let us concentrate on only punitive and disciplinary measures. We should not act as if we are in normal times. We are not in normal times. This is the new normal of distress and stress all over. These students might not have been prepared well for this period, for this distress that could have happened to anybody else. And so they should not just concentrate and be interested in just disciplinary and punitive actions. They can decide that as part of the measures they would take, deboardinize these students, but that should not go without being given psychosocial support through all of this. Sometimes some punitive measures would have to go along whilst they are provided with some psychosocial support, but it should not be without the punitive measures to deter others. Should not be without the mental health aspect, should not be without looking into the psychosocial support that these students need.
Dr. Oswentry, kindly hold the line for me. We've been joined by Dr. Mike Boakye Iyadom for more on this. He is an educationist, a fellow with the Institute of Educational Planning Studies and Administration at UCC. Thank you very much, Doc, for joining us. So the statements by the Ghana Education Service indicates that we have some teachers who are also complicit in this, and that they sort of attempted to help the students cheat. Surprised at this revelation?
Well, not too surprised, and not too surprised because this is not the first time that we are hearing this. So in terms of surprise, I would say no. Of course, the conduct of examinations are guided by policies and procedures. And as and when these policies and procedures are violated, I believe the sanctions must apply. But again, as we apply the sanctions, we also have to make sure that these sanctions will have some educational components, some interventions that aim at reforming our students and reforming whoever is involved in these practices. We don't want this to repeat itself next year and the subsequent years. And that is why some interventions aiming at bringing some reforms and changes in behavior will be helpful. And it's also important to also look at this in the context of student development. How far have our students developed in various areas? The ability to manage emotions and the other area that we need to look at. So I'm not too surprised.
And I want to throw the issue of demodernization to you as well. There was a reason why in some schools that run both day and the boarding system, the day students were asked to move into the boarding house. Now, if some of these people are found to have misbehaved, the Ghana Education Service is saying that they should be demodernized outrightly and be made to commute from home to write the exam. I don't know if this sits with you well.
Well, I think GES is applying the sanctions as we have them in the books, but we should also realize that COVID-19 has come with a lot of innovations and changes. We don't want the students to go home and put parents and friends at risk and vice versa. So yes, the sanctions must be applied. That is what we have now. But I think we can also look at more innovative ways to make sure that in the context, in the period of COVID-19, more appropriate sanctions are considered.
Yesterday, you said that these are isolated cases. You do not think that they are widespread like it's been perceived. But the situation is on the rise. We keep reporting cases of such violence in schools. And if you look at the severity of the attacks on some of the WAEC officials, the teachers, and even journalists who today are receiving treatment at the hospital, this is something that is growing and must be nipped in the bud. How do you deal with this?
I think the language of the Ghana Education Service is one way to go, that if you get involved in this, you'll be punished. If we don't come out strongly as they are coming out, and if we don't begin to intensify education on our various campuses, there are many senior high schools that have not experienced this, many of them. I think it's time for tutors and academic advisors and counselors in these schools to begin to have some discussions and some educational interaction with their students, that if you do this, there are consequences. And if you do this, and you are asked to go home, it could have an effect in your examination results. You may lose some concentration and all that. So for the schools that haven't experienced anything, I expect some kind of education to begin immediately, if that hasn't begun already, so that we don't have a replication of this in other schools. Let us remember that some of these young adults, some of these students are looking for identity. Some of them are struggling with who they are and how they are identified within the school. And some may go negative way just to have some form of identity. I am the one who led this particular activity. I am the one who gave the voice to the student who didn't have that voice. That is a possibility. And that is why I believe that very serious, targeted, intentional education must happen in all the schools immediately, so we don't have these things spreading to other senior high schools.
And let me wrap up with you, Dr. Ozwentri. Right activists have said that, in an attempt to discipline the students and to make sure that we control the situation, it shouldn't affect the education anyway. The papers have just started. Some of these students have been identified. How should the punitive measures be rolled out such that it doesn't affect them for the rest of the papers they have to take?
I would recommend that if there are any sanctions or punitive measures, these students should be made to finish writing their exams before we met out the full extent of whatever punitive measures there are. you have rightly said that they have more papers ahead of them. We don't want their results or their performance in subsequent papers to be affected because of this. But if we can postpone till they have finished, then we can met out the full measure of whatever punitive measures there are. And I emphasize that in the course of meting out these punitive measures, we should not forget to offer them some psychosocial support. It will be an opportunity to build their emotional quotient, how to be able to manage the stress as they grow in life. And at the end of the day, you wouldn't have just meted out punishment, but you would have gotten a young person or a human being who is totally developed physically, emotionally, and all spheres of their development.
And finally, Dr. Boakye Adam, what do you make of the suggestion that it's perhaps about time we begin to look at alternative ways of assessing students rather than this routine sit-in, long hours exam over a certain period that sort of stresses them? Maybe we should begin to look at alternative ways.
I strongly believe so, and I think it's long overdue. The system that we have now puts so much pressure on students and even parents because, and I think I made this clear 2 days ago, it's become a do and die affair. If you don't pass the WASSE, you are in trouble. So parents want to make sure the students pass, and the students themselves want to go all out and then pass. But in the long term, I believe that we need to have very strong policies that will direct co-curricular activities in our senior high schools and other pre-tertiary institutions. We know that students develop how to manage their emotions and interpersonal relationships, issues of integrity outside the classroom. These are developed through targeted, intentional co-curricular activities, co-curricular programs that have learning outcomes. If a teacher is taking students to a juvenile center for the students to have an idea of the consequences of being deviant, that must be planned well with learning outcomes and some reflection, so that when I take the students to this place and they interact with the inmates, when they come back, I want to evaluate whether those learning outcomes were achieved, so that the co-curricular activities are not haphazardly run as we have them. People take students, teachers take students to a place for community service, field trip, they come back, hooray, that's the end of the day. So in actual fact, we are not helping students to develop the skills and competences that they are not getting in the classrooms. So I look forward to some policies that will make co-curricular activities more intentional, more targeted. And of course, we need to build the capacity of our teachers to be able to facilitate these co-curricular activities.
And thank you very much, Dr. Mike Boakye Adam. He is a fellow with the Educational Institute at the UCC. We're also joined by consultant psychiatrist, Dr. Ruth Osu Entry there for some discussion on the ongoing disturbances in our senior high schools as they sit the West African School Certificate Examination, WASSE. And the Ghana Education has also sent out a strong warning that it will deal with students who are found complicit in this, as well as teachers who are also found to have assisted in any way. Meanwhile, we know that government says the giving out of the handbooks, the past questions, cannot be, the cause of what we are seeing in it today and throughout the week. Let's move on and do some other stories now. President Akufo-Addo has relieved the district chief executive for Amansia South District in the Ashanti region, William Asante Bediako, and Ekuapem North Municipal Chief Executive Dennis Abuaji of their positions. The decision of the president was made known in a statement by the Ministry of Local Government announcing the nomination of the new people to take over their positions. Mr. Bediako was in the news recently defending operations of illegal miners within his district in the video, which was reportedly taken at a ceremony to commission a toilet facility at Manso Tontokrom. The DCE expressed his disagreement with activities taken to clamp down on illegal mining, popularly known as galamsey. The reason for Mr. Dennis Abuaji, who is the Ekuapem North MC's dismissal, is unclear. Meanwhile, the president has announced that Abdul Mumuni Issa is to succeed the mayor of Sekondi Takoradi, the late mayor Anthony K.K. Sam, who died from COVID-19 at the University of Ghana Medical Center on Friday, June 12, 2020. Let me take you up north now to some story we're following for you. Family of the 83-year-old man who has been kidnapped at Kambugu in the Bunpurugu Nanpanduri district of the Northeast region has called on police to step up the rescue efforts. The old man, Koyan Yarban, was abducted on Monday morning by a group of people on his way to a family meeting. His son, Isaac Yarban, who narrated the incident to JoyNews, says the kidnappers, about 3 of them, tied his father's hand behind his back before taking him out of the village on a motorbike. According to him, the family suspect his father was being held in one of the Ghanaian communities in Togo. They want security agencies to fast-track his release from the abductors.
Actually, I'm still appealing to Ghana police and then people in authority to intervene, to come in and then assist us to help rescue my father's life, because he's now in somebody's custody and he's not in safe place. So I'm pleading with people in authority, together with security personnel in the country, including policemen, to come in and assist us, because our lives are in danger, our lives are in risk. Common food. I cannot tell you the day I ate since this thing started. I cannot tell, and then the quantity of food that I could eat, put inside my stomach as I'm standing, because I always worry if I sleep, if something just make noise outside, how my heart bumps. The same thing my old lady, as she was narrating to you outside there. So we can't sit, we can't eat, we can't sleep. So we are living in a way that I don't know the adjectives I will use to describe it. We are not free at all. We are not free.
You're watching News Desk with me, Anna Smith. We're taking a break. When we return, we'll tell you about the Joy ballot box. We'll tell you where next the train is stopping and why you shouldn't miss this program. Details coming up shortly after this break. Don't go away. Thanks for staying with us here on News Desk. And remember, this is your election headquarters. We have a number of programs for you in the run-up to the December 7 elections. One of it is the ballot box, which is running across various platforms here at the Multimedia Group. Today, the train is stopping somewhere, and I have my colleague from Adum, the producer of this very event, joining me. Tigo, thanks very much for your time here on News Desk. Where is the train stopping this time?
We are doing Ablekuma South. And for the purposes of those who may not know Accra very well, Ablekuma South is where we have Mamprobi, we have Banana Inn, we have bits of Dansoman, Kolegono, Kolebu, those areas. Okay,
okay. And we have a sitting member of parliament.
Yeah, exactly. Oko Vanderpoy is the sitting member of parliament. Yes, Oko Vanderpoy.
Okay, so what are some of the issues? I know that each constituency is different.
Yeah, exactly.
They have issues that affect them and issues they want to highlight.
Exactly.
What are some of the issues that are already coming up?
Okay, so we are still collating the ballots, but we know that there are issues of sanitation, there are issues of internal roads, there are issues of water.
Okay.
Yes, so yes, by midday today, we should be clear on what exactly the top priorities are.
Okay,
yeah. So
it means the ballot box is already in the community?
I mean, ballot boxes have been in the community for the past 2 days.
Okay.
The people are enthusiastic, they are excited, they are dropping their issues. We have, I mean, all segments of society getting interested in this program. People of disability, youth groups, women groups. I mean, people are excited. The political parties are excited. Everybody is assisting, so we have a successful program. The program would be at the neighborhood center, very close to a place they call Christmas in Egypt.
Okay.
Yes, just behind the Mamprobi police station. Okay. For the purposes of COVID and the protocols that we want to put in place, we are limiting ourselves to just 100 people.
Okay.
And so the program would air on Adum TV. It will be on Adum FM. It will be on Inshra in Kumasi. and it will be on Asempa FM.
And
so
online as well.
Yes, it will be online, it will be on social media. You don't need to be at the center. The center is restricted to only the people we have invited. But it promises to be an exciting show.
But even before then, because we have the ballot boxes already there, you can just walk up to the box, write your issues, put it in there, and then you have them addressed.
Exactly.
And I just want to know, we are going to pick live comments as well from our social media handles.
We are going to put
so we
live
encourage people to...
We encourage people to engage us on social media, engage us online. One, there are breaks, you are close to the area and you want to maybe give us some information, you don't need to come to the center. Any of our handles, Adom 106.3, Asempa 94.7, Adom TV, we have all our social media channels. You can just go to any of those handles and send us a comment.
Thank you very much. So the time is 5?
It's 5. We're starting at 5, we'll end at 7.
Very well.
Yes.
On all the Adom platforms.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Justigo, for bringing us the latest. That's the ballot box coming to you. For those of you in Ablekuma, you want to be a part of this. You're watching News Desk. We're taking a break. We'll bring you business. Darryl Call has the latest.
Hello there, it's time for business. I'm Charles Aite. The Institute of Fiscal Studies, IFS, has criticized government social intervention programs amidst COVID-19, stating that they were poorly executed and lack fiscal prudence. With Ghana's debt servicing taking 72% of Ghana's revenue, the IFS warned of Ghana's fiscal position will be the worst since 1993 if austere measures like immediately seeking debt release from debtors and slashing down employee salaries aren't taken. There is more in this report. According to the IFS, the review of the 2020 budget estimate shows that Ghana's fiscal position has dramatically worsened. So far, the total revenue and grant for 2020 is projected to be 53.7 billion cedis. However, debt service expenditure is also projected at 38.5 billion cedis, while employee compensation is projected at 27.1 billion cedis. Dr. Said Boache is a senior research fellow with the IFS.
Monies in excess of employee compensation and debt service expenditure needed to meet other budgetary expenditure items had to be borrowed, because compensation and debt service expenditure have consumed virtually everything. So every money the government needed in excess of this amount needed to be borrowed.
Based on the figures, some economists say the government will have to borrow to the tune of 11.8 billion cedis for the 22.1% of total revenue and grants before it can fully service its debts and pay for employee compensation. The IFS has termed this as unprecedented in the Fourth Republic and perhaps in the country's history. Dr. Said Boache recommends some solutions.
This is unprecedented in the Fourth Republic and perhaps in the country's fiscal history. Refrain from engaging in fiscal populism despite the looming 2020 elections. The government should immediately seek debt release, including debt forgiveness from its major creditors, so as to minimize the enormous size of the country's debt service expenditure.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19 in Ghana, economic policy making has been dominated by strategies to address the many impacts of the pandemic. In addition to policies introduced since March, government recently announced the Ghana Cares program, which involves a 100 billion cedi development initiative to mitigate the economic challenges brought about by the pandemic. Now, in times of COVID-19, it has become increasingly difficult for government to prioritize with very little resources, especially when every sector needs help. It is based on this that 28 teams of Ghanaian regional and international economists were tasked to research to identify promising solutions for Ghana. A renowned 7-member panel of top experts called the Ghana Priorities Eminent Panel will vet these solutions in a 3-day conference in Accra. Now, speaking at the launch of the panel on behalf of the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, was Professor Joe Amoako-Tufo. Let's listen to him.
It is not in anyone's aspiration to want to live with COVID-19. Even with a common cold, It is not our desire to live with it knowingly. What we need to do is to fully understand as best as we can what are the key parameters and the extent of our preparedness in dealing with this public health crisis. So I think what government is doing is bringing together the experts, asking them what they need to do their work as best as they can, demanding of them to give us all the scientific evidence, and leaving it to government then to decide on the basis of the evidence. Remember, the medical evidence is just one part of the story. There's a lot more, the human story, everyday story that don't show up in the statistics, but they show up in our everyday life. So government must be ready, put in place a whole lot of instruments to listen, to analyze, explore options, both in the short term and the medium term.
Well, and that's how we end business. I'm Charles Aite.